If you're watching this, then I failed. Not just to stop it, but to remain human. The book, it's not fiction. It's alive. It breathes through us. Chapter 1 isn't a warning. It's a trapdoor. I found the first sign beneath the wooden slats of my grandfather's attic, where dust blanketed a space that hadn't seen light in half a century. The old man had vanished years ago, declared dead in absentia, but nobody was ever found. They searched the forest, the basement, even the river, but the Atikna one thought to look up. The journal was wrapped in flayed parchment, brittle and curling like it had been salted. Beneath it was a circle etched into the floor, blackened with age, yet perfectly preserved. Salt crystals formed impossible angular shapes that flickered between pentagons and things without names. I touched it. I shouldn't have. To look beyond the veil is to burn the eyes of your soul. From that moment, I began hearing something of frequency at the edge of sound, like old film unraveling in reverse. My nails bled that night, not from injury, but from something forcing its way out from under them. The circle didn't just stay there. It followed medron and condensation on mirrors, formed by crows circling above. Something had marked me. That night, as I slept, I dreamed in languages I've never studied. My tongue moved on its own, chanting syllables that tasted like copper and decay. My body convulsed, not in terror but reverence. In 2015, NASA satellites picked up a 17-second burst of infrasound from deep under Antarctic Caniver explained. The journal warned about this. It spoke of the circle of want, a glyph designed not for summoning, but feeding. It doesn't call things into our world. It invites them to notice us. A cosmic knock on a door that should have remained unbuilt. My hands, once steady, now tremble at random. It's not fear, it's withdrawal. That symbol is addictive. Some historians believe the Necronomicon is not a book, but a linguistic virus embedded within collective human consciousness. If you ever see the circle, don't erase it. Don't step into it. Most of Alden completed. My bones began to sing. Not like a melody, not even like noise. It was resonant slow, throbbing pulses that hummed against my joints, echoing up my spine like the vibrations of a tuning fork struck by something not made of matter. At first I thought it was tinnitus. Then the words formed. To carry truth in bone is to carry madness in marrow. I didn't hear them with my ears. I felt them. As though some ancient frequency had activated a second language inside me, only written not in sound but in vibration. My skeleton became the conduit. I could not sleep lying down anymore. The pressure of the bed dulled the voice, made it angry. It spoke names, not mine. Others. Names I've never heard, never could pronounce. Dead languages, maybe. Or unborn ones. I recorded the pulses using a contact microphone pressed to my wrist. The audio file sounded like thousands of insects chittering inside a stone vault. And then the fever started. In 2004, surgeons in Italy reported a rare case of a woman whose bones emitted faint, electromagnetic signals during periods of stress no medical cause was ever found. My x-rays came back distorted. The technician said it looked like my radius had split. Not broken split, like tree bark under drought. Inside the gap was a filament. Something metallic, curling like a coiled hair. The doctor assumed it was a scanning artifact. He didn't notice the way the filament changed position between x-rays, but I did. The journal had a passage about this buried, deep in a section marked flesh conduits. It warned of echoes buried in calcium, signs of infection by the silent choir, a parasitic liturgy. It doesn't just speak, it implants its voice into your frame, so when the time comes, your body sings the hymn automatically. Some occult theorists argue that bone is the only substance in the human body ancient enough to remember pre-human voices. The longer I listened, the more I realized this voice knew things about me I'd never said aloud. Memories from infancy. My grandfather's final words I wasn't there to hear. And still, they echoed in my chest like I'd swallowed a cathedral. You can plug your ears. You can blindfold your eyes. But how do you silence your bones? It started with a shallow cut, not from an accident, but instinct. One evening, without conscious thought, I took a small silver blade from the desk drawer I didn't remember owning. and traced a line just beneath my wrist. No pain. No blood. Just silence. I looked closer. Beneath the thin layer of skin, I didn't see muscle or capillaries. I saw distance. Like peering into a dark hallway lined with flickering lights, stretching impossibly far into something vast and pulsating. My flesh was no longer a boundary, it had become a gateway. To open the body is to open the map. I reached for my phone flashlight, angling the light against the wound. What should have revealed flesh instead reflected wall smooth, undulating, and organic, like the interior of some cosmic artery. And in that hallway of vein and shadow, something moved. At first, a whisper, a twitch, then teeth. In 2020, surgeons in Japan reported a patient with a non-malignant tumor that appeared to contain a fully developed human molar and what appeared to be undeveloped ocular tissue. The patient had never reported any family history of such abnormalities. The wound closed on its own within minutes. No scar, no trace, but something had been seen by both of us. The journal spoke of the corridor of giving, an anatomical threshold that may manifest once the Necronomicon is understood on a molecular level. It stated plainly, the first cut is not a wound. It is an invitation. Some linguists theorize that certain ritualistic incantations alter the neurochemistry of the body to the point where symbolic cuts create transspatial tunnels between dimensions layered within human anatomy. Over the following days, I began sketching the shape I saw in my arm. Not just the corridor, but the thing crawling through it. Tall and skeletal, with too many elbows. Its eyes were not set in its face, but floating just behind it like orbiting thoughts. I couldn't resist. I reopened the cut the next night. The tunnel was still there but shorter, more intimate. And this time, the thing inside pressed its fingers against the skin of my world from the other side. You won't believe me when I say this, but it was warm, and I missed it when it left. It began beneath my bed. At first, I thought it was sleep paralysis. I'd wake up unable to move, the air heavy like tar, and the floorboards beneath me would creak slowly, rhythmically, like breath held in wood. But it wasn't the bed. It was what slept under it. To sleep above the hunger is to feed it. I moved the mattress one night in a panic. What I saw wasn't a shadow, it was an absence of light entirely. A pool of blackness seeping through the wooden planks, writhing like smoke trapped in water. My cat refused to enter the room after that. She'd hiss at the floor and claw at the air. Then came the rearranging. It started with organs. I'd feel sharp aches not from outside injury but from movement inside me. My intestines shifted positions. My liver beat once like a heart. I vomited thread. Sometimes I'd wake up with my shirt soaked in a strange translucent fluid that shimmered violet under moonlight. In 2013, a team of researchers in South Africa reported a patient whose intestinal tract had restructured itself into a spiral pattern without surgical interference. No known condition could explain the phenomenon. The hunger wasn't abstract. It was anatomical. It watched through me, smelled through my lungs, tasted through the sweat in my pores. It didn't just exist, it nested. The journal described this as the descending appetite, an entity bound not to time or space, but to the vertical alignment of human suffering. The lower one sleeps, the closer it gets. Occult physiologists from the 17th century believed certain demons could only feed through compression, requiring their victims to be prone, pressed between gravity and dreaming. I stopped sleeping on the floor and built a crude platform above the attic beams. Higher, away. It didn't matter. Last week, I woke to find my ankles dangling through the board skin, sliced open neatly, like they'd been offered. Whatever was underneath had climbed higher, and it is still hungry. It started as a sketch, just a meaningless doodle I traced absent-mindedly during one of the journal's readings, a spiral knot, intersected by a crescent. But no matter how many times I tried to redraw it, the lines changed. Curved where they were once straight. Bled ink where I never touched. Eventually, the paper devoured itself, curling into ash at the center and vanishing from my desk. To trace the mark is to invite its hunger. A day later, I saw the symbol again, this time in the condensation on my bathroom mirror. I hadn't drawn it there. Yet when I tried to wipe it away, my hand stung. I looked down. Tiny sigils had formed along my fingertips like branding iron marks seared into the whorls of my prints. That night, my reflection did something I did not. It smiled. In 1996, a Russian research group studying cognitive hallucinations captured a video of a subject whose mirror reflection blinked independently from the subject's actual eyes. The footage remains unreleased. I avoided mirrors after that. Every surface showed something slightly off. A missing pupil, a different angle of light, my reflection mouthing things my ears couldn't process. I covered all glass in the house, but the symbol still appeared. Eventually, I gave in. I drew it again, perfectly, without trying. My hand moved like it remembered something I didn't. As I finished the last line, the paper curled again, but this time, something pulsed in the air. A static hum. The lights dimmed. And then, my nose began to bleed in reverse. The blood didn't leave, it went in. Back into me. Through my tear ducts. Through my ears. My body swallowing itself. The term self-consuming glyph appears in Mesopotamian texts describing symbols not designed to be read, but to unravel perception when completed. The journal called it the first mouth. Not a mouth that speaks, but a mouth that devours identity. Every time I draw it, I forget something. A memory, a name, a part of myself. Last night, I drew it twice. I no longer remember who I was before I found the book. Only who the book wants me to become. He came during the red hour. Not quite night. Not yet morning. That invisible threshold when birds fall silent and dreams taste like dust. I didn't hear him arrive, I felt it. Like every molecule of air had decided to recoil at once. The walls stretched. The lights went out. And then he stepped through. To wear the flesh of others is to forget your own. He was tall. Too tall for the hallway he emerged from. And yet the space twisted for him like the architecture respected him more than me. He had no skin. His muscles were exposed, pulsing with blackened veins and shimmering like oil. But over his face, stitched with surgical precision, was a mask. Not one made of plastic or wood, these were real faces sewn together. Eyes stitched shut, mouths puckered with rot, and all of them smiling. I tried to speak. My jaw wouldn't move. My body refused to acknowledge I still had control. In 1974, during an excavation near Aleppo, archaeologists uncovered a burial chamber with over 50 human faces, preserved without skulls. No records of mummification matched the preservation method. He knelt in front of me and placed a hand more claw than hand in my chest. Not aggressive, not gentle either. Ritualistic, like he was checking if my heartbeat aligned with something older. And when he whispered, it wasn't sound, it was memory. My childhood, my secrets, my most shameful moments played back in reverse, like film melting. And when I blinked, he had changed. Now he wore my face too. The journal called him the Flesh Archivist, a collector of identities, not for malice but preservation. He only takes what you discard, guilt, regret, old emotions you bury. And when you meet him, he offers to carry them for a price. Occult biologists theorize that certain entities can replicate human identity by absorbing emotional residue embedded in neural networks. The deal is unspoken. You never say yes, you just stop resisting. I looked at the mask one last time before he left. The mouth moved. It whispered something with my voice. You look better without it. I woke with blood in my mouth and no memory of chewing. My teeth were intact. But on my nightstand sat a cracked ceramic plateau I'd never seen before, filled with 6 yellowed human nails and 2 bloodied molars, still warm. I tried to scream, but something in my throat felt stitched, not with thread, with silence. To give unwillingly is to strengthen the bond. There was a note beside the plate, written in handwriting that didn't resemble mine. It read, "Next time, offer something more meaningful." I vomited bile for hours. Then, as I tried to burn the plate, it refused to blacken. The ceramic absorbed the flame like skin drinking sunlight. And then it laughed quietly, a dry crackle, like laughter filtered through bone dust. In 1991, a farmer in rural Argentina reported dozens of ritual plates appearing in his field overnight, each containing different human remains. Local authorities dismissed it, but 2 officers later disappeared, and one was found with his teeth removed, still alive. The journal had warned me. In the chapter titled Devotional Attrition, it stated that the Necronomicon doesn't simply demand knowledge, it expects sacrifice. It does not consume what you cherish. It consumes what you ignore. So I gave it things I thought didn't matter. The tip of a finger, an extracted wisdom tooth, strands of hair I'd already lost. Each morning, a new plate. Each night, a dream of mouths that didn't close. And in return, I receive, not gifts, abilities. At first, I could hear whispers through walls. Then, I could smell lies. Eventually, I could taste time's bitterness, its decay, its inevitability. But with each gain, I lost something else. A childhood memory, my ability to cry, a dream I used to have about my mother's perfume. Some fringe occult practitioners believe every sensory upgrade in ritual magic must be balanced by a neurological regression site for memory, smell for empathy. The price escalates. The latest note read, "Flesh will not be enough soon." And the plate, it's getting larger. At exactly 3:33 a.m., the air went still. Not quiet still. Like reality had paused, holding its breath, waiting to see what I would do. That's when the glyph ignited. Not with fire, but awareness. A pulsating eye-shaped symbol I'd etched days before began to move-not shimmer, not glow move, as if something on the other side had noticed it. To draw the eye is to invite its gaze. I knelt in front of it involuntarily, my legs folded without command, hands resting on thighs like a supplicant before an altar. The symbol began to widen, splitting itself down the middle like a vertical pupil. I didn't know what I expected to see, perhaps tentacles, flame, or gnashing teeth. But instead, something blinked. A single blink. A cosmic, incomprehensible closing of perception. And I felt it inside Memi brain, skipped like a scratched record. Time jolted. My left hand was suddenly wet. My right eye was bleeding. In 2007, during a particle collision experiment in Switzerland, several observers reported experiencing a brief déjà vu followed by loss of time perception. One researcher claimed, "I felt observed by something older than light." No official report acknowledged this. I should have looked away. But the thing with eyes like that, things that blink in the void, they don't just see, they understand. The journal had labeled this glyph as the Cyclopean Aperture, a sigil meant to awaken attention from across dimensional strata. Not a summoning, but an invitation to be observed. Paracelsian alchemical scrolls describe ocular sigils as keys to internal awakenings mechanisms by which the soul's geometry becomes legible to entities outside causality. When the blink ended, my reflection was gone. Not altered, gone. No shadows, no outlines, just blankness where I should have been. I touched the mirror. It was warm. It pulsed. And then it blinked too. I collapsed. Woke hours later with a bruise over my heart, shaped like an eye, blood-ringed, unblinking, watching. It hasn't faded since. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still see that pupil watching back. And each time, it blinks a little slower. It began as humming, low, wordless, rhythmic. I thought it came from the radiator, or from outside, maybe a passing train. But when I turned off every device, every switch sealed the windows, and sat in complete silence, I still heard it. Closer now, coming from inside my lungs. To sing the hymn is to inhale the void. The melody grew clearer, the more I resisted, and with it came pressure, not in my chest, but in the air itself. Like the room had grown heavy with invisible water. I gasped for breath, and my lungs filled not with air, but a cold, heavy mist that tasted like salt and iron. Then came the words. I didn't understand the language, but my throat formed it anyway. The chant echoed up from my diaphragm like it had always been there waiting. I wasn't singing. I was releasing something that had lived dormant inside me. In 2019, an underground monastery in Tibet was found completely abandoned. The only remaining sign of life was an etched phrase in 16 languages. The breath remembers. My voice shifted mid-hymn, became layered, first 2 tones, then 5, then dozens, a choir pouring from one throat. The sound made the walls twitch. The ceiling bled condensation. My plants withered instantly. The journal calls this the submerged choir tonal resonance that bridges human respiration with interdimensional frequency. It is not meant to be spoken aloud. It is meant to resurrect sound to give it memory, agency, appetite. Some esoteric sound theorists believe frequencies between 8 Hz and 13 Hz can trigger spontaneous trance states and hallucinations, particularly when combined with breath manipulation and linguistic repetition. After the 3rd night, I stopped sleeping. I was afraid of what I'd sing in my dreams. One morning, I woke up choking not on air but on silt. Black, damp sediment caked in my mouth and nose. I had not left my bed. The sheets were soaked in seawater. Wherever the hymn comes from, it is under something, beneath matter, beneath understanding. It's not calling me down. It's calling something up. And if you ever hear that melody in your lungs, do not exhale. I stopped writing when the ink moved on its own. At first, it was subtle. Letters smudged when I hadn't touched them. Periods appeared mid-sentence. But then, one night, I opened the journal to an entry I hadn't written, and it knew things. Things I hadn't said aloud. Things I hadn't even thought clearly. It described my breath patterns during sleep, the tremor in my left pinky, the exact weight of my fear. To record the dark is to invite it to speak. I tried burning the pages. They screamed, not aloud but with pressure. My ears bled. The fire turned green, then froze, then reversed. The page reassembled itself midair and fell gently back onto the desk. The next morning, my handwriting had changed. It looked older, sharper, like the ink had been pressed in with bone. In 1983, a university archive in Prague documented a series of journals that rewrote themselves overnight in languages no historian could identify. Most of the texts have since vanished. I started testing it. I'd leave blank pages and return to find them filled, sometimes with gibberish, sometimes with diagrams I couldn't comprehend. Once, it wrote my own death scene down to the second, and it hasn't happened yet. The journal isn't reactive, it's anticipatory. It doesn't answer questions, it asks them. In dreams, in symbols, in forgotten songs I now hum unconsciously. The more I ignore it, the more violently it writes. Once, it inked directly across the walls in letters the size of furniture. Write or be written. Anthropological researchers once theorized that certain cursed manuscripts may function as mnemonic parasites, rewiring a reader's cognition in service of an alien language. I can't stop now. My hands move on their own. Sometimes I wake up mid-sentence, pen in hand, hours of text sprawled across the floor in languages I don't know. The last passage I wrote her was written through, mended with this: "You will not die on paper. You will die into it." And I don't know if this journal belongs to me anymore, or if I belong to it. The itching began in my sleep, a slow burn across my back, like something was writing on me from the inside out. I tried scratching, clawing, nothing soothed it. But the morning after, I stood shirtless before the mirror and saw it. Symbols, thin, raised welts running down the curve of my spine, like calligraphy carved by fire. To wear the word is to become its echo. Each day, more lines appeared, intricate, curling, aggressive in their geometry. Not just marks, but syntax. My body had become a page, and something was using me as its canvas. I tried recording them, sketching them before they faded, but the shapes wouldn't stay still on paper. They moved when I looked away, shifting into new words, new structures, like the sentence was still being written. In 2006, during an autopsy in eastern Turkey, a forensic pathologist reported vertebral scarring in the shape of Proto-Canaanite glyphs. The body was later claimed by an anonymous organization, and the report was retracted. I couldn't sleep on my back anymore, not just from the pain, but from the whispers. I'd wake up reciting syllables I didn't understand, spitting blood that shimmered blue under moonlight. At times, I'd feel pressure at the base of my skull, like someone was whispering into my spine, pushing thought directly into marrow. The journal calls this phenomenon vertebral transcription. a process by which forbidden languages manifest in biological form, not to communicate with others, but to rewrite the self. Linguistic occultists believe certain cosmic dialects are too volatile for sound and must instead be integrated into the body's nervous system for containment. Soon, I began to understand the symbols visually, not semantically. They felt like instructions, movements, choices, ways to become something more than human or less. My dreams became blueprints. My posture began to change, me spine curving unnaturally to match the glyph's flow. And when I placed my hand over the final mark, I felt my heartbeat slow, not in fear, but in synchronization. Like the language had aligned me with something deeper, something far below thought. I am not the author, I am the parchment. And the writing isn't done. I met him in a place not marked on any map. It wasn't a cave or a tunnel, not even a dream. It was between thoughts, between seconds. A hollow pocket of time where breath didn't echo and memory thinned like fog. He was waiting there, knees folded, body trembling, what was left of him. Anyway, to surrender the body is to harvest the self. He had no lips. His tongue pulsed like a blind worm. His flesh, what remained, was translucent, stitched with blackened thread that looped endlessly through his limbs. Every movement looked painful, but it wasn't agony. It was devotion. He was offering the last parts of himself. In 1988, an unmarked cassette tape was found buried beneath a chapel in Malta. It contained a man's voice muttering a repeated phrase in 7 languages. It takes what you give and gives what it takes. No speaker was ever identified. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His thoughts pressed against mine like damp cloth on skin. I felt what he had sacrificed. His fingers first fed to a symbol that glowed when wet. Then his spine unthreaded slowly and reshaped into a ladder. And finally, his name. He gave that too. The journal referred to him only as the final translator. A man who, in pursuit of complete communion with the Necronomicon, gave more than blood. He offered structure. His body became a dialect. His scars were syntax. His organs verbs. Post-occult literature occasionally references flesh lexicons, individuals whose physical transformation allows non-human entities to access or anchor themselves through anatomical grammar. When I knelt beside him, he held out a bundle. Skin, tightly folded like a parchment scroll. Mine. I didn't remember giving it. I didn't remember the knife. He looked at Menet with eyes, but with emptiness. That terrible, infinite lack that surrounds sacred things. And he mouthed a phrase with no sound. Finish the sentence. And then he unraveled. Not like cloth, like language. Words becoming breath, breath becoming void. And then nothing. I wept. Not for him, but because I finally understood what the book wanted. It doesn't want your soul. It wants your syntax. It wasn't in the house when I moved in. That much I know. The hallway had always ended with a wall. But one morning, after a particularly vivid dream of the drowned Hymne, opened the door to my linen closet and found stairs. Cracked, slick with condensation, leading downward into a dark that didn't smell like the basement or earth. To walk downward is to fall inward. I recorded myself entering the stairwell. My phone clock marked it as 3 minutes. The footage, however, was 47 seconds long, and it ended before I turned the first corner, just static and breathing, not mine. The walls dripped like muscle tissue. The air thickened with every step. There were no lights, and yet I could see, or maybe something wanted me to see. In 2009, a spelunker in the Carlsbad Caverns vanished after descending a narrow chute. His GoPro was found 6 months later, melted into a stalactite. No video could be recovered. The descent warped time. I remember blinking, and suddenly my nails had grown. My hair was damp. My limbs ached as if I'd aged a week in moments. The stairs were endless, but each landing bore new graffiti. Symbols, scratched warnings, prayers written backward. Eventually, the steps stopped. Not at a floor, but at a ceiling. Inverted, like gravity had flipped. I stood, weightless, staring into a void where rooms floated like organs connected by tissue, by wires, by thought. The journal had a name for it: the internal labyrinth, a space unbound by geometry, its shape determined by guilt, memory, and ritual awareness. Some rogue physicists suggest that certain human structures, when built according to specific irrational angle scan, serve as gateways to psychospatial folds in localized spacetime. I walked into a room that mirrored my childhood bedroom. Everything in it was perfect, except my reflection. It was older, wiser, hollow-eyed, and it mouthed a single phrase. "Keep going, there's no back anymore." I ran. The stairs never ended. And now, every door I open, any door, might be the stairwell again. Sometimes, it already is. The dreams returned wet, pulsing, full of pressure. I woke drenched in cold sweat, my abdomen searing with heat. Not pain, activity. Something was moving inside me, not metaphoric, literally shifting just beneath the skin. I rushed to the mirror, peeled back my shirt, and stared at my own belly like it had betrayed me. And then it blinked. To see inward is to invite the gaze from without. Not one, but two eyes fully formed beneath the thin membrane. Above, my navel opened wide and stared back at me, not with recognition, with expectation. The pupils dilated when I moved. They followed light. They responded to motion. They were aware. I screamed, but it came out muffled, because in that moment, I realized something else. I was no longer seeing with my eyes. My vision had shifted lower, warped. The world tilted down from then on. My sense of depth and direction no longer felt human. In 2010, a man in northern Canada was hospitalized, claiming he had gained a third-person perspective. Doctors diagnosed a psychiatric episode. But during imaging, small, unidentified tissue clusters were discovered in his abdominal cavity responsive to light stimulation. I covered the eyes with bandages. That only made them angrier. The skin blistered, then healed, then blistered again. Each time I tried to suppress them, my dreams grew more violent. Not toward Mebu, through me, as if something was using my body like a window. The journal referenced this mutation in a page inked with a diagram titled Ophidian Witnesses. It explained, when the soul refuses to see what it knows, the body finds new ways to look inward. Paranormal anatomists have speculated that advanced ritual exposure can reroute visual perception to somatic locations, gut eyes, being symbolic of primal instinct reclaiming cognition. Soon I stopped using mirrors altogether. My own face no longer felt like mine. I began catching glimpses of myself in puddles, windows, metal, and the reflections weren't consistent. Sometimes they smiled when I didn't. Sometimes they blinked from the wrong place. The eyes in my stomach no longer close. They stay open when I sleep, and lately when I wake, I'm seeing what they see. It didn't ask for death. It never did. Death is final, useful only to those who misunderstand the book. The Necronomicon doesn't want you to die. It wants you hollow, willing, stripped of memory, voice, structure reduced not to ash, but to language without author. To be bound is not to be trapped. It is to forget you were free. I followed the instructions written on my skin, drew the final symbol over my chest in ash, salt, and saliva, a spiral in reverse, a word spoken backward, not aloud, but with intention. The journal had stopped writing days ago. It didn't need to anymore. I was the journal now. In 1972, a cryptographic linguist disappeared after creating a theoretical dialect composed entirely of verbs. His final note read, "I no longer require nouns. I've become action." My tongue dissolved, first not physically, but conceptually. I could still eat, still breathe, but speech became impossible. Not because of pain, because I'd forgotten how sound fit into structure. I could only gesture. Symbols danced across my fingertips whenever I moved. My memories began to fold inward, flattening like pressed leaves until they curled into ink. People I once loved became sensations, concepts, then nothing. The journal described this final transformation as the silent contract. It isn't an ending, it's a merging, a surrender, The book is not a tool. It is a pathway, a corridor of forgetting that leads you not into death, but irrelevance. Not lost, unwritten. Some philosophers argue that total self-erasure is the purest form of transcendentia, regression to pre-language, pre-identity, where thought is no longer distinct from the cosmos. And now, as I finish this last line scratched with bone and blood across the floor of a room that may not exist, no longer remember my name, or why I began this. Only that something is now watching through my eyes, breathing through my lungs. And soon, it will use this story to find you. Turn off this video. Forget what you've heard. Forget me. And if you ever feel a word on your tongue that you don't remember learning, don't say it.